Sri Lanka's most powerful news brand.
ආයුබෝවන් අපි බලයට ආවේ දූෂණය වංචාව නවත්වන්නයි.
Ayubowan. We came into power to stop fraud and corruption, to punish the corrupt, no matter their party, color or position. A short while after this government was elected to power, the allegation was raised regarding the bond issue. We did not sweep this under the carpet. Within 2 weeks, an investigative committee was appointed. During the period of the investigation, the governor of the central bank stepped aside from his duties. Parliament was informed. I informed Parliament that a select committee could be appointed if they wished. The report of the investigative committee was tabled in Parliament. At the time, the chairman of COPE was a member of the ruling party. However, in the current Parliament, the position of chairman of COPE was given to a member of the opposition. Subsequently, the committee commenced its investigation into the bond issuance. This report was presented to Parliament. It was debated. On the 31st of October 2016, this report was submitted to the Attorney General to take appropriate action. In this matter, COPE had especially recommended that further investigation must be carried out into the company perpetual treasuries. As such, following discussions with me, the President appointed a presidential commission. We supported the activities of the commission. Our ministers went before the commission. I too went before the commission. No government has acted in this way to conduct investigations when an allegation is raised. This was examined on 3 occasions via committees. During the tenure of the previous government, such allegations were raised on several occasions. However, no investigation was carried out in any of these instances. Information was not revealed to Parliament. When we raised questions in Parliament, answers were not given. Parliament has purview of financial governance in Sri Lanka. This power vested in the Parliament had been forgotten. We conferred this responsibility to COPE and Parliament in order to re-establish Parliament's powers of financial governance. This responsibility cannot be removed from Parliament. Through this bond incident, we witnessed a display of Parliament's financial governance powers. It is also the best example of the transparency with which the government functions. The Commission's report notes that perpetual treasuries improperly earned a total of 9.2 billion rupees. The central bank, which is under the purview of my ministry, the Ministry of National Policies, currently retains a sum of 12 billion rupees belonging to this company. Accordingly, as recommended by the Commission, the sum of 9.2 billion rupees can be recovered. We will follow the course of action proposed by the Commission for this purpose. As such, the state will be able to recover the total sum of money. No loss whatsoever will be caused to the state. Furthermore, if any officials are found to have been involved in this fraud, action will be taken against them according to the law. From the time that allegations were raised about the bond issue, we extended our fullest support to investigate it. We will also take all possible steps to implement the recommendations of the Commission. We have been able to prove through action that our government is a principled, disciplined and civilized government. We have not seen a government act in this way in recent history. Our ministers resigned, citing violations of tradition. The law was implemented. Court decisions were issued without interference. The people expressed their views with freedom. The media has functioned without fear. Not only that, we have appointed a committee headed by Minister Tilak Marapana to make inquiries and take decisions regarding members of our party if they have been named in the report. We will take action in line with the recommendations of this committee. This is a tradition that we will instill and implement in the United National Party. Our party will follow tradition and the concept of good governance and rebuild the country. We will rebuild the village and bring about a bright future for this country. We will bring forth the change and good society that the people hoped for on the 8th of January. This is not something that can be accomplished in a single day or a single night. This test, too, can be considered a beginning for this task. We will pay equal attention to the past and the present. However, this proves that we are on the correct path. We are correcting mistakes. We are addressing shortcomings. The actions that we have taken since the bond allegations were raised to now shows that we have brought about a good beginning. We are not only investigating the fraud and corruption of the previous government, we are also inquiring into fraud and corruption that is taking place now. We are investigating it and we are taking the appropriate action. It is our intention to bring forth a bright future for our country. It is our intention to make our country a good and wealthy country. We will work together to achieve this goal. Let us overcome the challenges and create an empowered Sri Lanka.
ඒ අරමුණ ජය ගැනීම සඳහා අපි එකට එකතුව කටයුතු කරමු. අභියෝගය ජය ගනිමු. බලගත් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවක් නිර්මාණය කරමු.
Good evening to our listeners, good evening to our viewers joining on our Simacast on Yes 101 and Newsfirst Primetime News Bulletin on TV1. Now you just witnessed the Prime Minister's address to the nation with regard to the bond transactions and the Bond Commission report. This evening we received a letter from the Prime Minister's office stating that the Prime Minister's speech should be aired after 6 p.m. at a convenient time. We have brought you that special statement. The statement was titled about the report of the Bond Commission and the current political situation of the country. That was the Prime Minister speaking to us about the current political situation of the country and the Bond Commission report. I have here with me Mrs. Zulfiq Farsan, who has been reporting on the Bond Commission proceedings from its inception, and Mr. Farah Shaukat Ali, who has been reporting on the bond scam from its inception once again. Good evening to you, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Let's get to the point straight away. The Prime Minister's name has been mentioned in the report several times, and we see our viewers on Yes FM have been also joining in, are able to hear and see the Prime Minister speaking once again about the Bond Commission report. Faraz, let me start off with you first. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's a little bit rich for the Prime Minister to be the judge and the jury of this entire matter. He speaks of a loss of 9.2 billion, and he says that Perpetual Treasuries has assets of approximately 12 billion held by the central bank to their account, and he implies that the 9.2 billion can be settled and that will be the end of the matter. Well, that's completely and utter nonsense, because as the Prime Minister knows jolly well, when the matter goes to court, as per the recommendations of the Presidential Commission, there is a fine to pay, and that fine amounts to twice the amount of the loss. So in Mr. Arjuna Mahendran's case, it's 688 million times 2 brings the total to approximately 1.3 billion. And in the case of Perpetual Treasuries, it's 1.3 billion, that's 688 million times 2. And on the second, the losses on to the EPF, it's 8.5 billion times 2, because that's the fine. So that's 17 billion there, and a total of 18.3 billion to Perpetual Treasuries, 1.3 billion to Arjuna Mahendran. So where on earth is this money coming from? It's way, way above the 12 billion. You can't do a robbery and then expect to settle the money and walk away scot-free. That's not the way the law works in this country.
Zulfiq, before I get you, we'll listen to the Prime Minister's speech, but I want to ask a question from Faraz once again. Faraz, now we hear the Prime Minister talking and speaking about the Bond Commission report. We also know that the Commission report has been sent to various authorities and the investigation, and the Prime Minister's name is in fact mentioned in the report. So
That's right.
In this background, let me ask you this question. Can the Prime Minister come forward and speak about the Bond Commission report in the first place?
I believe that it is completely unethical for the Prime Minister to do that. And for a person with his expertise and his knowledge, and the fact that he is a legal man himself, it's not acceptable.
Let's listen and have a look at Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe's speech, a part of it, before we continue this comprehensive discussion.
අපි බලයට ආවේ
We came into power to stop fraud and corruption, to punish the corrupt, no matter their party, color or position. A short while after this government was elected to power, the allegation was raised regarding the bond issue. We did not sweep this under the carpet. Within 2 weeks, an investigative committee was appointed. During the period of the investigation, the governor of the central bank stepped aside from his duties. Parliament was informed. I informed Parliament that a select committee could be appointed if they wished. The report of the investigative committee was tabled in Parliament. At the time, the chairman of COPE was a member of the ruling party. However, in the current Parliament, the position of chairman of COPE was given to a member of the opposition. Subsequently, the committee commenced its investigation into the bond issuance. This report was presented to Parliament.
පරීක්ෂණය ආරම්භ කරා.
As a matter of fact, this central bank bond scam was actually exposed by the media as soon as it happened. We reported on the matter on the 8th of March 2015, a mere few days after the first bond scam was reported, and several print media organizations also did their duty in reporting this matter. Now let me turn to Zulfiq. Zulfiq, there were several committees that were appointed. There was a COPE committee inquiry, an interim report that was leaked. All of this happened, yet we hear the Prime Minister saying that he helped, or the party or the government actually went through to investigate this matter. What are your thoughts on this?
Chaturanga, when you listen to what the Prime Minister had to say, as a matter of fact, it was an attempt to sweep it under the carpet, and it was exposed because of the continuing outcry by the media like us. Because of that, this matter was exposed to the public, and there was public outcry for a proper investigation into this. Now, once this incident happened, the Prime Minister appointed a committee, a 3-member committee led by lawyers, and it was known as the Pitipana Committee. Now, making a statement in Parliament just days after this bond issue took place, the Prime Minister said that he appointed the committee because he wanted to know the facts himself, and he wanted to know it first before proceeding on this matter. Now, public outcry continued even after that committee put out its report, and the 7th Parliament, the COPE committee led by Chairman D.E.W. Gunasekara, investigated the matter. They brought in officials to gather evidence on this bond issue. But before the report came out, Sujiva Senasinghe, who was an MP, went to court and took an order preventing this report from being exposed or made public. And several weeks later, Parliament was adjourned, and therefore the report was actually never tabled in Parliament as a report, though it was leaked later in the coming months. Thereafter, the 8th Parliament was elected, and then, continuing with public outcry, mounting public outcry, forced the Parliament to appoint COPE, once again, this time led by Sunil Hanunneti, to investigate the bond matter once again. Now, COPE of the 8th Parliament, or the Sunil Hanunneti COPE report, in that report, there is a clause which says several members agree with the report without footnotes, and several members agree with footnotes. Now, before we come into the footnotes, now COPE, during the COPE proceedings, one member resigned, and thereafter Sujiva Senasinghe was included into COPE. And after that only we heard talk about these footnotes coming in.
Yes.
And then Sunil Hanunneti said in Parliament that when the investigations were going on, he was under so much of pressure. The pressure was so much that at one point he said that he walked out of the COPE inquiry, and he had to be brought back in again after being convinced that let's go on with this. So that was the situation. And even after that, continuing public outcry, because 2 reports by COPE, one with footnotes, one without footnotes, and then the President appointed the Presidential Commission of Inquiry, which has now made its comprehensive report public.
So it is now clear, Zulfiq, that through the years, people have been trying, the members in the COPE itself have been trying to sweep this actually under the carpet, and it is because of the media's exposure, the media exposing this matter from time to time, that this Presidential Commission was appointed, and the Presidential Commission report is now being discussed, and the Prime Minister himself has come before the media to talk about this. We also have another portion of the clip of the Prime Minister's speech. Let's have a look at it now.
In this matter, COPE had especially recommended that further investigation must be carried out into the company perpetual treasuries. As such, following discussions with me, the President appointed a Presidential Commission. We supported the activities of the Commission. Our ministers went before the Commission. I too went before the Commission. No government has acted in this way to conduct investigations when an allegation is raised. This was examined on 3 occasions via committees. During the tenure of the previous government, such allegations were raised on several occasions. However, no investigation was carried out in any of these instances. Information was not revealed to Parliament. When we raised questions in Parliament, answers were not given.
කරුණු හෙළි කළේ නැහැ. පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ ප්‍රශ්න කර අවස්ථාවේදී පවා පිළිතුරු දුන්නේ නැහැ.
I think the general public of our country would agree that the former government, while with their corruption allegations against them, were changed and chased away on the 8th of January 2015 because of these allegations that were raised against them, and the people did not appoint a new government so that they can also continue the same amount of corruption and crime that the previous government did. Now I want to focus my attention once again to the topic at hand, to both of you all. A question. Now, we saw several ministers, even the Prime Minister in his speech is mentioning that several ministers, powerful ministers of the UNP-led government came before the Commission to provide their evidence as requested by the Commission. There were changes in how these questions were raised towards one minister and towards another group that came later, and even the Prime Minister himself when he came there. What happened?
Chaturanga, I want to pose this question, and Zulfiq will know about it because for 11 months nearly, Zulfiq has been following the proceedings with keen interest and has produced 13 wonderful books, notebooks, clearly with everything that went on. Now then, Zulfiq, why was it, let me ask you, why was it that the questioning of Ravi Karunanayake, which was so intense, and to sometimes argumentative even. Why was that level of questioning not given to Messrs. Kabir Hashim, Malik Samaravikrama, and of course to Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe?
That's a very interesting question for us. Now, yes, the Prime Minister testified, right? A sitting Prime Minister coming before a commission. And then, you know, we saw Kabir Hashim, Malik Samaravikrama.
That was also due to the media pressure that was exerted.
Due to the media pressure, because the Prime Minister was sent a questionnaire.
Yes.
That's right.
The Commissioner said if they need further answers that he will be summoned, and thereafter he was summoned. The reason why he also came before the Commission was because of the mounting pressure by the media like us, saying that the Prime Minister has to come and testify and answer these questions. Now, when the Commission was going on, Ravi Karunanayake was the first powerful minister to come. He came in as the Minister of Foreign Affairs because he was previously the Finance Minister. Now, when he came in, he was questioned by Senior Additional Solicitor General Dapula de Oliveira. Mr. de Oliveira went hard on Ravi Karunanayake. Like you said, for us, there were argumentative positions during that cross-examination. But thereafter, when Kabir Hashim and Malik Samaravikrama came, the team from the Attorney General's department took a back seat and did not pose any questions. The questions were posed by the commissioners themselves. And then, thereafter, the Prime Minister came at a very special sitting because the Commission said at one point that they are concluding the recording of evidence, and after that only Ranil Wickremesinghe was called in. Now when he was called in,
accompanied by about 30 or 35 members of the United National Party, key members once again,
indeed,
all there to support the Prime Minister of this country.
Indeed. Inside there were key members and outside the loyalists were there. So when the Prime Minister came in, we hoped that we would see some good questions being posed. But we were surprised, I was taken by surprise because it was the Attorney General himself who was there, who was posing the questions. And I did not see Mr. Dapula de Oliveira, who is the team leader of that team, who went hard at every single witness who testified and forcing some witnesses to reveal the truth. He did not ask questions at that position.
Sorry, can I just interject here? We acknowledge that it was a serving Prime Minister who turned up and gave evidence, and yes, it probably wouldn't have happened in a previous government. Yes, yes, yes. However, let us bear in mind that for Ranil Wickremesinghe as the personality, this was not the first time that he came before a presidential commission. Let's remember that he made another appearance, and that was before the Batalanda Commission under President Chandrika Kumaratunga.
And Zulfiqar and Faraz, both of you, we know that, as Faraz said, but did this sitting at the commission or this questioning, did it actually reveal any sensitive information, the so-called secrets of this bond transaction? Was it actually revealed because the Prime Minister came there, or was it once again a little a drama maybe from the United National Party?
That is the question that we also have to ask, whether actually the truth behind this incident came. Because in the commission report we see that Perpetual Treasuries Limited, Arjuna Mahendran, Arjuna Aloysius, Kasan Palisena, employees of the central bank, EPF have been implicated. They have been. It's clearly shown that they were involved in this incident. But the question that the people have right now is, apart from that group, who gave them the instructions? And the truth behind those instructions, are those revealed?
We know what happens to a member, a person living in a poor village. What happens to him or her if that person is involved in some robbery or some activity that is concerning thievery? The Prime Minister also had to say something about how the transactions of this, how the money of this bond transaction can be accumulated back into the system. Is it the correct way? Let's have a listen to the Prime Minister now.
We conferred this responsibility to CORP and Parliament in order to re-establish Parliament's powers of financial governance. This responsibility cannot be removed from Parliament. Through this bond incident, we witnessed a display of Parliament's financial governance powers. It is also the best example of the transparency with which the government functions. The Commission's report notes that perpetual treasuries improperly earned a total of 9.2 billion rupees. The central bank, which is under the purview of my ministry, the Ministry of National Policies, currently retains a sum of 12 billion rupees belonging to this company. Accordingly, as recommended by the Commission, the sum of 9.2 billion rupees can be recovered. We will follow the course of action proposed by the Commission for this purpose. As such, the state will be able to recover the total sum of money. No loss whatsoever will be caused to the state.
රජයට ලබා ගන්නට පුළුවන්. රජයට කිසිදු අලාභයක් සිදුවන්නේ නැහැ.
Now, as soon as we started, Faraz told you how the value or the amount that should be accumulated back into the system is not the amount the Prime Minister mentioned in his speech. And you would know what happened to the mother who got caught to the police while trying to rob 3 coconuts so that she can feed her children at home. You know what happened to the boy who stole 3 mangoes because he was hungry. But here we have a situation where members of this so-called company have come forward, taken money through a bond transaction that happened and have invested it in other businesses as well and have profited from that money that was accumulated to them. And now the Prime Minister of this country is saying, if we return back the money to the central bank, the money that is being held by the central bank, which comes under my ministry, or the institution which is under me, there is no problem, no loss to the country. Is this correct?
It's absolutely incorrect. Unfortunately, and it's a very, very sad state of affairs, when our Prime Minister, decides to be very, very economical with the truth. The fact is that the Prime Minister is not disclosing the full story. And the full story is this. Mr. Arjuna Mahendran, his term finished on the 30th of June 2016. The Presidential Commission's remit was up to and including 31st of March 2016. In the 3 months after the Presidential Commission's term tenure finished, or the period they were looking into finished, there was 3 months. Why doesn't the Prime Minister disclose to our nation, to our people, that there was a profit of 6 billion rupees in that 3 months? Why isn't he speaking about that? And we need to accept the fact that merely paying 9.2 billion, the loss, it won't do. 18.3 billion plus 1.3 billion from Mr. Mahendran, all that is just under a touch under 20 billion. That's the amount that has to be paid and recovered, not this 9.2 billion.
Zulfik, when you take a look at a situation where minor worker is involved, let's go to the level of a CTB bus conductor. If that happens, SLTB bus conductor, if he or she is involved in some form of corruption, to say robbed money or skimmed money, small amount, that person would be interdicted from the job and investigations would continue thereafter. But when it comes to the highest position of our country, when it comes to these people with so much of power, why isn't the law why is the law acting in one way to the small people and in another way to the persons who are in big and higher positions?
Chaturanga, we must be mindful that in Sri Lanka, theft is not taken very lightly. Now, if you look at the Prime Minister's statement, he says if you recover that money back, there's no loss. But does that mean that the prisoner who is in Valikada for a petty theft returns back the money that he looted, he can go scot-free? That is not the case. There is a judicial system in this country. So we must follow and obey the judicial system. Now the question now is, Chaturanga, now the Prime Minister made a statement. Now should the Prime Minister make such a statement when the matter has come out in the open, and while an investigation is going on, and while investigations are about to be carried out by certain authorities as instructed by the Presidential Commission? Now that is one serious question. And in fact, when the Prime Minister is making this statement while the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, which is the institution where this whole thing took place, is still under his ministry. Let's shift to a quick point before we move on. You might remember the Sakriti scam. The man involved in this whole thing, or the mastermind involved in this whole scam, was tracked down by Interpol and then arrested and brought back to the country, and all his assets were seized, and then the prosecution started.
And Zulfik, let me add here that from Tangol we had Dadua Mudalali. Precisely the same thing happened to him. And
same thing happened with Mr. Lalit Kotalava.
Absolutely.
Assets were seized within 24 hours, if my memory serves right.
In a very short period of time.
So all of this comes back to the situation where people involved in higher places with a lot of power have tried to sweep this under the carpet all throughout. That is what we are trying to highlight throughout this the Prime Minister's speech. The actions that have had transpired from the beginning up until today have led to this being swept under the carpet.
Now, Chaturanga, the Prime Minister says 9.2 billion can be paid and there will be no loss to the country. He's obviously very cleverly avoiding the criminal element of this under the penal code and so on. And is this why, as our leading President's Counsel Hemantha Warnakulasuriya pointed out on Newsline a few days ago, he said that the Attorney General is passing this file to the civil section and not the criminal section, and they're leaving out Dapula Dilivera and Yasanta Kodagoda.
For us, with that, we had to go in and listen to the Prime Minister's voice cut once again. Let's have a listen.
Furthermore, if any officials are found to have been involved in this fraud, action will be taken against them according to the law. From the time that allegations were raised about the bond issue, we extended our fullest support to investigate it. We will also take all possible steps to implement the recommendations of the Commission.
It's God bless to the officers who are involved. Every time something happens in our country, we see that the people who have power very quickly, very swiftly puts the officials in the limelight and say, no, it was the officials who have done this. Obviously, Zulfik and Faraz, an official working at a certain institution will not be able to carry out things according to his or her own whims and fancies. Obviously, there's a hierarchy that is working. The instructions have to flow through, and someone in the political sphere, the public representative, is responsible for the decisions taken by the official. There could be exceptional cases, of course, but here what has happened is the Prime Minister himself said in Parliament back in the day in March 2015, March 17th, that I insisted in a system change. With things like that, once again, can the Prime Minister come before the nation and point the finger at the officials?
Indeed, Chaturanga, if you take a look at the recommendation of the report and the executive summary, it clearly says that Arjuna Mahendran wrongfully conducted himself, and he did not consult the tender board at all when it came to accepting those bids. So, like you said, any public officer holding office is accountable to the chain of command that is there. In the case of Arjuna Mahendran, he is accountable to inform the monetary board about any decision, and he should consult them, and thereafter that Central Bank of Sri Lanka comes under the minister in charge of that institution. So there is indeed a serious question. Is the blame game taking place right now?
Chaturanga, I'd just like to remember and remind our viewers and our listeners that just consider what happened to Lalit Weeratunga. He was the chief secretary and the presidential secretary and so on, and he was the chairman of the TRC, and in the Sil Reddy case he received a prison term. He also there was no question of returning the money and going home. He spent some time in jail and he's out on bail at the moment.
But the former head of
but
state
let me tell you what happened to him. He's lost his pension. 38 years of public service, he's lost his pension because he broke the law.
And the former head of state came and said, I asked him to do it.
Exactly.
So with that, we
but
have another...
nevertheless,
yes,
he lost his pension.
We have another cut of the Prime Minister's speech to the nation. Let's have a listen.
We have been able to prove through action that our government is a principled, disciplined and civilized government. We have not seen a government act in this way in recent history. Our ministers resigned, citing violations of tradition. The law was implemented. Court decisions were issued without interference. The people expressed their views with freedom. The media has functioned without fear. Not only that, we have appointed a committee headed by Minister Tilak Marapana to make inquiries and take decisions regarding members of our party if they have been named in the report. We will take action in line with the recommendations of this committee. This is a tradition that we will instill and implement in the United National Party. Our party will follow tradition and the concept of good governance and rebuild the country.
Now another committee has been appointed by the United National Party with Mr. A very well-known lawyer in the country, Mr. Pitipana. I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, Mr. But my point is that Mr. Pitipana was also appointed. We see committees and committees being appointed by the United. It's come to a point where we mess up the jumble the names also.
Absolutely.
So, what is happening here, Zulfik?
It's a pre-orchestrated confusion. Zulfik?
Well, if I may add to that, right now Tilak Marapana, a very renowned lawyer, has been appointed to this committee, which the Prime Minister just mentioned in his statement. Now, Tilak Marapana was a minister of law and order in 2015, and he was forced to step down from his ministerial portfolio because it came to the limelight that he was appearing on behalf of Avant-Garde, another controversial issue in this country. Now, he came forward, made a statement, and then stepped down from his ministerial portfolio. Same thing happened to Ravi Karunanika, who is currently still a member of Parliament. Now, Mr. Tilak Marapana's brother is Mr. Gamani Marapana, another well-reputed lawyer in this country. He has a good reputation. He has no question. There is no question about his legal profession. But he was retained by Arjun Aloysius to appear on behalf of him at the Presidential Commission of Inquiry. Now, more serious questions are coming out. Now, to the Prime Minister, the people of this country are very intelligent, and now they understand things better than before. In the end of his statement, the Prime Minister says they will build the village and it will be done by the United National Party. Now, why link building the village and the United National Party to a statement where he is speaking about the report of the Bond Commission and the political situation of the country?
Is the Prime Minister campaigning for the elections also?
That's a very good question, because the Elections Commission has clearly given some guidelines that need to be followed on the run-up to any election, whereas we are now facing the local government elections. Now, we request the chairman, or the honourable chairman of the National Elections Commission, Mr. Mahinda Deshapriya, to focus on this statement that has been made by the Prime Minister ahead of the local government polls.
While making that request from the chairman of the Elections Commission, now the Prime Minister, before making the speech, probably before recording this, had a special visit to the Bogambara prison complex. We have the visuals of that incident as well. For the benefit of our Yes FM listeners, the Prime Minister went to the Bogambara prison complex, had a look at the location where the gallows, including the gallows, and he's inviting a few of the journalists to record what is going on, because he's asking a few people to jump in also for us.
That's right. Well, I was rather wondering whether the Prime Minister was inspecting if this this new prison or the old prison was suitable for some people who may have to enjoy some time there.
This is something like jumping into the well, because such a the situation is Arjun Mahendran and Ravi Karunanika facing is something like that. They followed instructions, they jumped in, and now they are waiting to see how they are going to come out of this situation. Chaturangan, or the people of this country, are very intelligent. Things have changed, and even the scholars and the intellectuals have made their concerns regarding this situation.
Definitely.
Especially about the statement made by the Prime Minister.
As you very correctly mentioned, the people of this country cannot now be taken back to where they were. They have moved on, they have matured in terms of their intelligence. Now we have two eminent lawyers speaking to us about the situation here. We have senior lawyer Gomin Dasri and President's Counsel Hemantha Warnakula Surya speaking on their comments about the speech made by the Prime Minister. The President has decided to direct the Attorney General to look into any wrongdoing. Even though Ranil Wickremesinghe has not been named as one of the wrongdoers, the Commission has accepted that he is among those who are implicated. In such a backdrop, addressing the nation through state media will only serve to aid him. He has a responsibility to remain silent. If needed, he could express these views on political stages. However, he should maintain silence in this regard when addressing the nation or the media. Through this, he is exerting undue influence on the Attorney General. He is trying to create escape routes for others who have been implicated. Ranil Wickremesinghe is someone who knows about the law. He should let the law take its course. I see this as undue influence being exerted on the complainant party. Everyone should be treated equally before the law. A privileged Prime Minister should not receive special benefits.
The recommendation of the Bond Commission clearly shows the utter negligence of the Prime Minister in permitting Arjuna Mahendran and his nephew to commit this massive scam. As the Prime Minister and as the Minister in charge of the Central Bank, what action will he take to prevent the recurrence of this scam when it was pointed out? It was pointed out at the very first instance there was a huge scam and was reflected in the first D. Gunasekara Committee report. In the D. Gunasekara Committee report, whilst Arjuna Mahendran stated that he did this on the instruction of the Prime Minister, what action did he take? So therefore, even if there is no criminal action that is possible, he was negligent and he did not use the Obadima fides in order to prevent any such scam being perpetrated by the Central Bank authorities on the second instance. Instead of which, he actively or passively supported this issuance of bonds, which was contrary to his policy. Therefore, it is my position that by this action, the Prime Minister has to be questioned whether to find out really whether he is innocent of all the allegations that have been leveled against him in the Commission report and by the public, or in order to show his innocence, he must resign from his post and then submit himself to be investigated by the police, by the CID and by the Attorney General's Department so that there will be no impediment in questioning him.
We have this question to pose to the Prime Minister. This is the Prime Minister who so very much defended Arjuna Mahendran, the disgraced former governor of the Central Bank. I'd like to ask you, are you going to be responsible for bringing back Arjuna Mahendran to this country to answer the very serious charges against him and to recover 1.3 billion rupees? It's a very, very, very sad day indeed when the Prime Minister of our country decides to be so economical with the truth and tries to pull the wool over the people of this country. Well, that won't happen.
With that, we end our simulcast on Yes 101, but to the viewers of the TV1 Primetime News Bulletin, we have the cartoon of the day coming up. With that, we wrap up the Primetime News as well. Thank you very much for watching.
මං කෑ ගහනකොට ඔයගොල්ලෝ කෑ ගහන්න.
කවුද හොරා? කවුද හොරා?